Hello my beautiful friends. If this is your first time to my channel, my name is Emily. Thank you so much for joining me today. And today I am bringing you guys a brand new Shop My Stash video where I am finding dupes in my collection for the brand new Ace Beaute Blossom palette. Let's go ahead and hop right on into that. So if you are not already aware, Ace Beaute is an indie brand which has recently come out with 4 brand new palettes called their Paradise collection. And all of these palettes are very colorful and bright and beautiful, and they were all actually designed by someone on social media named Rach Makeup. I'll go ahead and link her down below, this way you can check out her Instagram. But she actually came up with these designs, and Ace Beaute saw them and wanted to make them a reality, which is really freaking cool. And I love that they did that and gave this girl the opportunity to not only make a bunch of money, but come up with really cool, interesting ideas and really use her creativity to its full potential. And obviously, she did a damn good job because everyone and their mama has been talking about how beautiful these palettes are. Even people who don't love indie brands have been talking about how pretty these palettes are, and I could not agree more, let me tell you. So a couple of days ago when they launched, I was on the website at 9 a.m. on the dot, pre-ordering the Blossom palette, which was the all pink palette, and of course this palette calls out to me. I mean, I've had multiple people message me saying, this palette reminded me of you, this palette is you, and I could not agree more. I said in another video, this palette is the physical embodiment of my soul, and I could not agree with that statement anymore because it's so true. But I wanted to bring you guys some dupes in my collection, or at least similar colors in my collection. These might not be 100% dupes, but they are as close as I could possibly get to what I already have in my collection without having to go out and buy more. Now, I did try to keep all of this single shadows because if you do want to pick up the palette, but for some reason it sells out, or you want to pick up a couple shades that are in the palette, but you don't want to go out and spend the $31.99 on the palette, then you can just refer back to here and get a couple of shades that I'm providing. So no way is this supposed to be a complete comparison, a complete dupe of the palette. These are just things that are similar in my collection because not everyone wants to go out and spend the whole $31.99. Sometimes people want to go out and pick up 2 different pink shades to add to their collection to get the general vibe of the palette without having to spend the entire whole ticket price tag. So that is my little disclaimer to the people who are thinking, these are not exact dupes, girl. I know, they're just the things that I had lying around in my makeup collection that I wanted to put to good use here. So without further ado, drum roll please. Let's go ahead and welcome all of my dupes that I found in my collection for the Blossom palette. And yes, I am going to be doing this for hopefully every single one of the 4 palettes that came out. So let's go ahead and get right on into what these shades are. So the first shade in the palette is called Desire, and it is this beautiful deep magenta warm pink. So I just recently got a shipment in from the brand Lick and Lash Beauty, which is a very strange name and I feel a little uncomfortable saying it. Lick and Lash Beauty, I don't even... This is besides the point. They have a shade called Rose that really called out to me, which is this big guy up here. And to me, this looks almost spot on to the shade in the Blossom palette. It is a beautiful, true hot, warm, pinky magenta shade. So I definitely knew that I needed to include that in here. The second shade is called Seduction, and it is a beautiful, warm, plummy kind of brown shade. So I decided to go with Max Sketch, which is very similar in color and in tone and in richness. They're both very much more on the purple side, but they have a hint of brown to them. So I felt like this shade really matched up with Seduction. Next up, we have Love, which is a beautiful, rich, deep blood red. And I decided to go for colored Raine Ladyship. Now this shade is a little bit more purple, but it does swatch out very similarly to the swatches that I've seen of the Blossom palette in that specific shade. So I wanted to include it because a lot of the reds that I have are more true Ronald McDonald red, or they're more purpley red. So this was the closest that I actually had in my collection in my single shadows. I have some others in palettes that may have matched up a little bit better, but I still feel like this purpley blood red color mixes well with the rest of the shades that I picked for this palette. So next up in the Blossom palette is the shade Beauty, and I decided to pick Pinky Rose's Gumball, which is right up here in the corner. The shade is almost spot on in my opinion. It's like a really cool toned hot pink, so it's not nearly as warm as, say, Rose from Lick and Lash Beauty. It's a lot more cool toned and almost a little bit more purpley, and I think that it looks absolutely spot on with what we see in the palette. In the Blossom palette, they included a beautiful, bright, hot pink, and I automatically thought of Davinas Romeo, which is in the second row right here. This shade is super, super bright, super intense, super vibrant. It reminds me of an 80s neon pink, and that's definitely what the brand was going for. Devinah came out with a pressed pigment that was supposed to be used on the body, but you can also use it on your eyes as long as you do not have sensitive eyes, because technically it is a pressed pigment, and technically, according to the FDA in America, we cannot use these on the eyes, but I still use them on the eyes, and my eyes are okay, I think. But the shade Love in the Blossom palette is so hot and neon and intense that I really wanted to reach for Davinas Romeo because it's very similar. These are very bright, very intense. These would be beautiful as a lid shade. These would be beautiful as a transition because I feel like Davinas Romeo really does kind of buff out to be a little bit softer, but if you do pack it on, you can get it very, very bright and neon and 80s-ish. This shade would be very fitting for an 80s theme party. So the next shade in the Blossom palette was called Eros. It is a beautiful magenta shade, kind of like the two mattes I just talked about, but it is metallic. It is very shimmery and very beautiful. It looks like a really unique shade, something that we don't really see often, and I just loved the addition of a shimmery hot pink in the palette. So this one's kind of funny. I went ahead and reached for Krisanna and Cosmetics Eros. Yeah, they have the same name. I don't know what's going on with that. I think it was just a coincidence, but it's kind of funny because they're literally the same exact color with the same exact name. So I don't know, but I could not put this color in my little palette here because it's the same exact color and they both share the same name. So they're essentially twins. So now we're getting into the beautiful hot red in the Blossom palette called Red Rose, which I think is the cutest name. I just love it. And I decided to pop in Coastal Scents' Vibrant Red. This shade is a very true kind of Ronald McDonald-y red, but it's a little bit deeper than, say, Sugar Pill's Love Plus, which a lot of people are familiar with for being their go-to matte red color. I really like the tone of Coastal Scents' Vibrant Red. It is a very bright red color like the name would state, but when you start to kind of blend it into the crease and really buff it and blow the color out, it turns a little bit more pinky, and I feel like that works really well with this color scheme. And I do find that this color has a lot of pigmentation. Now, some Coastal Scents shadows are kind of hit and miss. Some of them are really good, like needle in the haystack good, and some of them are kind of bad. But I find that this shade blends out really nicely. It's very comparable to Sugar Pill's Love Plus, but it's a little bit deeper in tone, so I thought this would be perfect for Red Rose. The Blossom palette had another really beautiful metallic shade, which was a more pink-based red metallic, which was called Orchid, and I absolutely love this color. I think it's very unique, kind of like Eros from earlier. I think both of the shimmers that they put in this palette that are of the pink nature are really unique shades, and I think that they're gorgeous. But I decided to pick Scarlet Faith by Beauty Escape Cosmetics, which is right over here on the side. This shade is very close to the one that we see in the palette. Scarlet Faith is a very pink-based red metallic, but it is still red. But it has a hint of that pink base to it, so you can see it on the eyes. It doesn't just look like your average basic rusty red shade. The bright pink really shines through, but it's not too intense because it does have that red base to it. I think it's a very unique shade, and I really like this color. So one shade that really drew me in to the Blossom palette was the shade Carnation, which, if you guys are familiar with my channel and you're familiar with some of my favorite palettes, I live and die for a bright, hot, peachy, orangey, pink shade. I know that's kind of a very descriptive way of saying it, but that's what it is to me. It's like a mixture between a pink, an orange, and a hint of peach. I absolutely love those shades, and of course this palette had one of them in it, so I knew I had to reach for Karity's Spring Break, which is right down here. The shade is so close to me, and at least in my opinion, this shade looks almost identical to Carnation in the palette. I live and die for these shades. They're beautiful. They are second best to a bright, hot magenta watermelon in my opinion. Those are my two favorite types of shades. Bright, hot magenta watermelon and peachy, pinky orange. That's a lot happening there, but I really do enjoy shadows that are this tone. I love mixing those two types of shades together, and I think that a shade like this can just be worn blown out all over the eye. You can do a one eyeshadow look and call it a day. I love shades like these. They're effortless, they're beautiful, and they're my favorite. The Blossom palette has a shade called Dahlia in it, which is, to me, kind of like a deeper salmon pink matte. So I decided to reach for my pressed eyeshadow by Star Crushed Minerals in the shade Coral Cream. To me, these are both a salmon pink, but they're a little bit deeper in tone and a little bit more on the pink side versus being more on the orange side. To me, these are very similar in tone, and if you notice with Dahlia, it's a little bit more on the pink side versus being more on the orange side, because the salmon color can kind of lean either more pink or more orange. And I find that both of these shades lean a little bit more pink, which I like. I think it goes with the color scheme really well. So next up in the Blossom palette is the shade Peony, which to me is an absolutely beautiful color that just drew me in immediately when I first saw the swatches. It is a beautiful, light, kind of peachy pink foiled shade. I absolutely love shades like this, and you're gonna hear me say that about almost every color in this palette and in the Blossom palette, because like I said, this palette is just speaking to my soul somewhere deep inside. So I love all of these shades. But I immediately thought of Clionadh's Pink Sugar, which is a shade that I use all the time on the lid. It is essentially the same exact color as Peony. It's a beautiful kind of peachy pink metallic shade. It is gorgeous, it is foiled, it is high shine, and I love it. And last but certainly not least, in the Blossom palette we have the shade Gardenia, which is your very basic matte kind of mid-toned peach shade, and I decided to reach for ColourPop's Issues, which if you've seen some of my videos like this where I dupe out palettes from single shadows in my collection, I'm sure that you have seen me talk about Issues before. It is a very well-loved shade by me, and a lot of palettes do include a shade like this, but I feel like with this color range, you almost need a shade like this because it kind of helps to neutral out some of these brighter pinks. It can kind of calm down the pink look a little bit by adding a little bit more of a peachy vibe into the eye look. It just makes the eye look a little bit more muted if that's what you're going for. So I feel like shades like this are necessary in the palette, and ColourPop's Issues is pretty much spot on with Gardenia. But with that being said, those are all of my dupes for the Blossom palette by Ace Beauty. Now, like I said, I did go ahead and pick this up, but I just bought it on pre-order, so I have absolutely no idea when these are going to be sent out. I don't know if they were doing a pre-order to see how many they needed to make, and if that's the case, these might not be sent out for a very long time. But I'm hoping that they get sent out sooner or later because I cannot wait to try the Ace Beauty formula and these beautiful shadows. But until then, I have my own little mock-up palette that I can use as a substitute for the real thing. But like I said, I am going to be trying to dupe out as much as I can from the other 3 palettes because I do want to provide you guys with options if you don't want to purchase the entire palette, or like I said, if anything sells out, because these are very sought after. This way you have some options. I like to keep my options open and like to keep your options open as well. But with that being said, that is going to be it for me today. I hope that you were able to find this helpful, and if you are considering picking up the Ace Beauty palettes, which I know a lot of you are because we've already talked about this, but please do leave it in the comments below, or if you find any of these dupes helpful, please leave that in the comments below as well. I do hope that you consider subscribing if you have not already. I am doing all sorts of makeup goodness on this channel, and subscribe to stay tuned to see when I post the other dupe videos for the remaining 3 palettes. I do also hope that you consider giving this video a big ol' thumbs up and hitting that notification bell down below. I hope you are having an absolutely fabulous, amazing, and beautiful day wherever you are, and thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time. Bye!